Good morning, class. Today we're going to go back to standard SS8H5, focusing on element C, which is to explain how technological developments, including the cotton gin and railroads, had an impact on Georgia's growth. Please make sure you follow along in your notes and fill in the blanks that are provided to get a better and more clear understanding of the material. We will have a quiz over this at the end of class to prepare you for your unit test. Westward expansion. Essential question. How did the cotton gin and railroads impact Georgia's growth? Move this box here. How did the cotton gin and railroads impact Georgia's growth? The cotton gin. The cotton gin is a machine that separates the cotton fibers from the seeds. This increases cotton production around the turn of the 19th century or the 1800s, and it made the economy of the South more agricultural. This led to more cotton plantations, and the South becomes known as King Cotton. This led to more westward expansion, and it also led to an increase in slavery. Now, as I'm sure a future slide is going to show, Eli Whitney in 1793 invented this cotton gin. Unfortunately, he did not provide a patent or a claim to this design, and he was not able to make a lot of money off this. But he was the one that actually designed the cotton gin. Again, that's Eli Whitney. Technological innovations and the railroad. If you look here, it shows that Chattanooga, which is here, the first railroad that came through Georgia, the Western and Atlantic Railroad, the most important railroad for Georgia, hit the major cities that are highlighted here in black. You got Chattanooga, Columbus, Macon, Albany, Tallahassee, Jacksonville, Savannah. It hit the major cities of Georgia. And here's, of course, a picture of the train. Georgia's railroad. The land constituting the city of Atlanta was once a Native American village called Standing Peachtree. The land that became Atlanta, the Atlanta area, was taken from the Cherokee and Creeks by white settlers in 1822, with the first area settlement being Decatur. On December the 21st, 1836, the Georgia General Assembly voted to build the Western and Atlantic Railroad to provide a trade route to the Midwestern United States. Following the forced removal of the Cherokee Nation between 1838 and 1839, the newly depopulated area was opened for the construction of a railroad. And again, we will discuss the removal of the Cherokee and Creeks in more detail in the next element of this standard. Here's a picture of some of your early train stations. As you see here, you've still got horse and buggy being used to get the goods to the train to be transported to other larger cities to engage in trade or commerce. Georgia Railroad again. The Indian removal and the discovery of gold in Dahlonega encouraged new settlement in the region, but it was the railroad that actually brought Atlanta into being and eventually connected it with the rest of the state and region. In 1837, engineers for the Western and Atlantic Railroad, a state-sponsored project, staked out a point on a ridge about 7 miles east of the Chattahoochee River as the southern end of a rail line they planned to build south from Chattanooga, Tennessee. The town that emerged around this 0-mile post was called Terminus, which literally means the end of the line. Now, this information was gathered from the New Georgia Encyclopedia, which is a great site for anyone looking for additional information on Georgia. But one of the things I want to point out is Atlanta initially was called Terminus. Later, it would be called Marthasville, and it was named after a governor's relative, and then eventually it's going to be called Atlanta. So it is important to know that our fifth capital of Georgia had 3 names: first Terminus, then Marthasville, and then of course eventually Atlanta, and you will of course need to know that on your quiz. Here's another picture again of horse and buggy, or actually these would be referred to as stagecoaches. And here is a picture of a railroad terminal that's a very important landmark in Atlanta. Atlanta owes its origins to two important developments in the 1830s. The forcible removal of the Native Americans, remember the sheet that we did the other day, the Indian Removal Act that removed the Creeks and the Cherokees from northwest Georgia, and the extension of railroad lines into the state's interior. Both of these actions sparked increased settlement and development in the upper Piedmont section of the state and led to Atlanta's founding. Here's another great picture of that railroad depot. And if you'll look here, you'll notice that this is not your traditional railroad. The first railroads back in the early 1830s, they used steam, and later, of course, they would use coal before the mechanical engines that they use today. But this is, steam was used for this. Steam was also used on ships during this area, and the major reason that trains are going to be important is because, again, it connects towns and areas all over the country for trade, whereas used to it would take you several days to get from, let's say, Savannah, Georgia to even Chattanooga, Tennessee. Now you're able to get on a train and go in a lot less time. Therefore, you can put goods such as your fruits, onions, things of that sort that are important in Georgia, and you're able to get those to other places in the country. Therefore, that increased your market and you were able to sell more stuff. This is also going to provide an increase in your populations, and that people are, especially people in the South, they've got larger and larger plantations, and goods such as cotton and tobacco can now be sold to the northern factories to be manufactured instead of being sent back to England in the whole mercantilism system like we had before the American Revolution. So again, the railroad is a very important invention, and it's important that you realize how big of an impact it actually had on the development of the United States. The area around the eastern terminus to the line began to develop first, and so the settlement was named Terminus in 1837. It was nicknamed Thrasherville after John Thrasher, who built homes and a general store there. The chief engineer of the Georgia Railroad, J. Edgar Thompson, suggested that the area be renamed Atlantica Pacifica, which was quickly shortened to Atlanta. The residents approved, and the town was incorporated as Atlanta on December the 29th, 1847. Again, the John Thrasher and it being called Thrasherville is something that is, to be honest, is kind of obscure information, but it is important that you know it was called Terminus, then probably Thrasherville, then Marthasville, and then eventually it was called Atlanta as of 1847, which is about 13, 14 years before the Civil War breaks out. The United States Railway System in 1870. Now, a lot of this area out here was unsettled area, and during this period, there's going to be something referred to as manifest destiny. Manifest destiny was an idea that it was the how do I put this? The destiny of American citizens to expand from coast to coast, to expand from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Now, this area down in here, of course, is still owned by Spain, and eventually it's going to be at the early 1800s. It's going to be Mexico is going to gain its independence, and a lot of this is going to belong to Mexico. So, but what I want to point out here in the 1870s, most of your railway networks, you notice there's a whole bunch up here in the north because that's mostly where your major cities are. You've got Cincinnati, you've got New York, you've got New Jersey. This is where all most of your major cities are. So just make sure that you understand that most of your major railways were over on the east coast of the United States. Compare the Georgia Railroad map on the left to the Georgia cotton production map on the right. What conclusions can you draw? Okay, so let's look at this. The section here shows a lot of the cotton production along here, and this shows the railroad maps. If you'll see here the dark black lines here, these are your railroads, and if you'll look, you'll notice that the major railroads were along where cotton was being produced. That way the cotton could be put onto the trains and shipped to the manufacturers to make various different things. How do the cotton gin and railroads impact Georgia's growth? This is just a summary of what we have already covered. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, the next slide we are going to, or the next section we are going to go to is SS8H5d, which deals with the Cherokee and Creek removal. But before we go into that, we're going to conclude this discussion and take a quiz over this information. Take just a few minutes and study with your partner, and then we will take a short quiz and then move on to the next section. Thank you.